I had given myself space to think. And we're dads and we're thought leaders and all this stuff. But how can you be a thought leader if you never give yourself any time to think?
Hey guys, and welcome to the SkilledDad Podcast. My name's Zach Reeser. I'm your host, and buckle up because we're going to have some fun with my guest today. Mr. Luke LeFevre is joining me on the podcast, and I want to say thank you, Luke, for jumping on here with me.
You got it. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad to be here.
Luke is one of the more fun people you're going to be around, and when it comes to creative ideas and creativity, and also like really harnessing kind of some of the core things that you're focused on or trying to get to that point, Luke is the man. And so that's when I saw, some of the things that he's going to dive into and what he's doing. I was like, man, I wonder if Luke would be on this podcast with me. It's just, especially around a certain topic, which we'll hit on in a minute.
Yeah.
But you and I had the opportunity to work together on some of the same projects for a while, and then also just seeing each other in the previous workplace and had a lot of fun. And I'm just pumped to have you on. I'm excited about this. So
pleasure to be here, man. You got it. It's so cool what you're doing and helping dads do their thing better. Love that. It's great.
Hey, this is the saying. You're a creative guy. You can tell me if this makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emphasis around like DIY.
Yeah.
And doing it yourself. And I love a lot of those things. But when it comes to being a dad, I don't think it should be DIY.
Yeah. That's good.
So
I think that's
why we have
man.
good people like you on here, because you're experiencing life and things you've learned. And you might be a chapter ahead of somebody else. And
I remember when I had my first daughter, she's like 17 now, and we brought her home from the hospital in this little carrier case. And I remember we left the hospital and we were like, they're just letting us leave. Like there's no test. There's no, do you know anything of what you're doing? And they just let us leave. And we got home and we set her down on the top of the stairs, in the carrier. And we just stared at her and we're like, what happens when she wakes up? Like, we're just in it. No, nobody checked on us. And it's like, you get more guidance to get your driver's license than you did making another human. It's insane. So I totally get that. DIY is not a great plan.
It's not a great plan. The good thing is there's more resources out there for dads specifically.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. You have a more sensitive test when it comes to driving. And we know how well that goes for some people than it does to strap a human being in your car. Do they at least check like that you strapped?
They checked if my buckles were right, but they didn't check that I was capable in any way.
I guess they're like, well, you can't return it. So
it's their problem now, I guess.
Yeah. Good luck. Hopefully we don't see it anytime soon. But you're exactly right. Like, we don't get a manual for it, but we have all the collective experience that, we don't have to do it alone. But that's why you're here, brother, to hear what you've learned, to see what you're doing. And sometimes, in the sit downs that I've had so far, a lot of the learnings also come from when we didn't get the buckle strapped in right to the car.
Yeah. Right. And so somebody else doesn't have to make that same mistake,
Right. Exactly. Or at least we hope not. But no one was hurt in making of this podcast, by the way. That's just hyperbole.
Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah. We hope not, but not yet. So Luke, I'm gonna throw out the big question, which is, it's probably just more of a, tell us about yourself, some of your background, some of your story, and then we'll just kind of take it from there.
Sure. Well, Luke, 44. I tell you that because my wife and I have been married for 23 years. We have 4 kids.
Nice.
She was my actually junior high and high school sweetheart. And we broke up for a little bit after high school, but we got back together. So we've been together forever. Yeah, 4 kids.
Well done.
My oldest is 17. My youngest is 10. And I don't know if I should say this out loud because my kids might listen to it someday. But I mean, I was talking to my mom not too long ago, and she reminded me of the kind of kid I was in high school. I said, I didn't want to have kids. I didn't want to have a dog. She told me that. I said, I don't even want to have a plant because that's too much responsibility. And so like, I've had to learn a lot and force myself to embrace this. And there's been I've learned so much from being a dad, and they've taught me so much about how it's not all about me, and that is a lesson we all need. And so I was at Ramsey Solutions for a long time, almost 15 years as a leader of the creative team there in different facets over the years. But about a year and a half ago, I left to start this business ministry about helping people follow where God is pulling them. And I call that process, when you actually listen to where God is pulling you, holy work, because he's transforming you as you follow that. Now, I say that's holy work, but over and over again, my wife reminds me, and I'm reminded over and over again, that our most holy work is raising our kids and being with them. The other day, we've had a lot of snow here in Nashville, you know that. And there was a snow day, and I was doing my normal thing, and I had a couple meetings, and then I was trying to write and do some stuff. And I was just like, there are only a handful of snow days that ever happen. And I grew up in the North, and there's snow there all the time, but school was not canceled all the time. It was pretty rare. And I was just like sitting here, and I'm like, this only happens a handful of times in our whole life. Like, we're going sledding. Like, I'm going to cancel a couple things, and we're going sledding. Like, this is, And so, I just embracing the idea of being a parent and taking that seriously has been a learned trait for me over the years. I don't have it all figured out, but I think we've done a couple things right. And, but it didn't always come natural. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, but on the snow days, that's interesting. Because we've had this baby snowmageddon in Nashville, which, I grew up in the North as well. And we're like, it just wouldn't be canceled.
No.
Yeah. I lived Tuesday for a while. It's like, it's like you just keep going. Yeah. But one of the things that has changed since those times is like the work from home aspect.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot more work from home. So for a while, if it snowed, like, there's not much you can do. I guess we're going to go sledding. But now it's like you have to make that conscious decision to say, I'm going to put pause on this and go sled. So I snowboarded, sledded, and skied last week.
Really? Where'd you go ski?
Well, I say that a little loosely. I had skis on my feet, and it was like a Tennessee hill. Our neighborhood has this actually pretty good hill. You can get at least like a 20-second run, which is great. But
hey, cool.
But no, I love that you kind of recognize that and take that time and step away and say, at least in the South, we're getting 5 days in like 2 years.
Yeah, right.
Because last year, did we get any last year?
No, we got nothing. Yeah, as you're talking, you asked me before the podcast, what are some things you want to talk about? And I didn't bring this up, but my wife is she is so intentional with with making memories, is what she calls it. She's like, I just want to plan things that make memories. And a lot of me maturing as a dad is because of her having just the inkling of an idea, and then I'll run with it. But basically because she's like forcing me to do something. So here's what she'll do. When my daughter, who's 17 now, turned 13, she's like, hey, let's make a big photo book, and I want you to write her something. And I love writing and making people feel things through words. And so she said, hey, go write something, and we'll put it together in a big photo book and give it to her on her 13th birthday to remind her of who she was, because she's about to go into these teenage years that everything's going to be coming at her, trying to take away who she is. And so we would do things like that. And my wife has really encouraged a lot of those things. And then I'll get excited about it once my brain gets going. But at the beginning, a lot of her prompting, and I think that's what marriage is about. It's about, balancing each other out. And so there's a couple of things like that I'd like to talk about eventually in our conversation, these intentional things that we did at 10 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old with our kids, and each walking through those too.
No, I'd love to hear that. And let's go back to holy work in a minute, but it's interesting you say that with the, it takes a little prompting.
Yeah.
I score probably like 25% on good analogies. So let's hope that this falls into that. But it's kind of like going to the gym too.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you just don't want to go. You're like, I'm not going to go. But then once you get in there and get that rhythm, you start seeing changes, results, and strength.
Yeah.
But it takes that prompting and that catalyst. And sometimes it's really hard to do by ourselves. That's where, if you got a good buddy, you just make sure that he pings you and gets your butt out of bed.
Yeah. Are you on the Enneagram? Are you an achiever? I think we've talked about this in the past. What do you know what your personality kind of is?
Well, it's up for debate. Okay. I would say if such a thing as a trait existed, then it would probably be along those lines.
Okay, cool.
Trait.
Yeah.
That's good. I know there's a lot of tie-ins between similarities and differences, but my wife will tell you that I'm definitely along the 8 line.
Yeah.
And then others would say that it's more along that 3 zone. So I myself am conflicted. So if you can provide clarity on that.
No, I don't have clarity. A 3 and an 8, sure. A 3 will become what they have to do, and 8 will get crap done. And so that's great. I only asked because of the prompting. I'm a 9, and there's this quote that I heard about 9s that I think is funny, but it sucks at the same time. It says they start off slow, but then they taper off.
And then they taper off.
And then they taper off. And there's another one that's like a 9 will do whatever's easiest, whatever's the least amount of work, and takes the least amount of energy, And so if I just go to my natural sloth-like character, I will not do anything. So I have to always be conscious of, all right, don't just be lazy. Don't just sleepwalk through life here. And it's the same with
Well, I'm glad you showed up to the podcast in that case. Taper off beforehand.
Yeah, right.
This is great.
I'm here.
You nailed it. That's funny. I've not heard that, but it's funny. But I think there's similarities with what we're hoping and are in many cases doing with this podcast, is that sometimes just having the knowledge is what can help you move.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what to do, then I don't think there's a lack of people wanting to do something. They just don't know what to do or what they can do. And so through knowledge and building things like this, and through you, somebody's probably going to have something that's like, I want to hear about those intentional things that you did when you were 13, 14, 17.
Yeah. Well, when the kids were young, it was like, I'd come home from work and we would just wrestle, or roll around on the floor. And that was super, super fun. Like it didn't take much to be intentional other than being around. And I think that is important, but it was my oldest daughter's, she's 17 now, like I said before, but she was turning 10, and it was the night before her 10th birthday where I was like, boy, she's 10 years old. Like, that's a decade. Like, that's important. And what did I plan for tomorrow, for her birthday? And we're Christians and we're believers. And I was like, what have I done to guide her other than us praying before bed and, things like that. And I'm sure she figured some of that out. But I was like, oh, you know what I want to do is at 10 years old, up until that point, kids always have like the kid Bibles, with the drawings in them and stuff like that. So I was like, I'm going to go get her a big Bible, a grown-up Bible with, a nice one, and maybe it'll have pink leather on it or something. And then I'm going to do something intentional. And so I woke up early. It was the next day. This sounds like I planned it all out, but it was really the night before, like, oh no, what have I done? And so I went and I got her a nice Bible. I wrote a note in the front of it. And then got her up in the morning and I said, hey, for your 10th birthday, we're going to go to the top of this hill. There's a hill over here in Spring Hill, Tennessee, that you can climb to the top of. You can see a lot of the view. And we drove up there and got to the top, and there's a little bench up there. And I just said, hey, turning 10 is a big deal. And it's where you start to mature in a different way. And you start to move in a different direction from being away from just being a child. And so I gave her this Bible and I made it ceremonial. You know, we were having fun. It wasn't like serious or anything. We got Chick-fil-A and we're eating it up there. And gave it to her and she was like, yeah, cool, you know, and it was great, but it wasn't like, and then the Holy Spirit came down and showed us exactly the future. It wasn't anything like that. And then we drove home and we got back. But I was like, you know what? She's going to remember that. But what happened was, my next son, he was 2 years younger than she is. And he said something, I think it was him. Yeah. He goes, because I had forgotten I'd done that for her. He goes, oh, and then when I turn 10, I get my Bible. And I was like, oh my gosh, they are all watching everything we're doing. And they're talking, you know? And so that thing that I kind of made up the night before for her, he brought up and has become one of those traditions that we do. And so I've done it for all 4 kids now. We take them to the top of this one hill, we get Chick-fil-A, because it's like ushering in the next decade of their life and hopefully having God as the guide, you know, through that for them. And just things like that are, oh, geez, you know, you kind of feel like you're making it up as you go, but then you do it and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to stick with this and make it an important thing. And so tried to figure out some different ways of continuing that on and as the kids get older. So that's like the beginning of those traditions. At 10, you get this, and then we do some other things later down the line.
I love that so much, not only because it shows like how much they are watching and how much they might want something, but like how just even, so like with your first, that was your first.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the first birthday of the first child is always a celebration, not only for the child, but for the parents, because the baby survived like the whole year. Everyone is still good.
Yeah.
But it was even the intentionality of wanting to go, and you had the idea, you wanted to go try to get it done. And the byproduct, it's like one of the greatest things about unintended consequences can go both ways. Right. So now they're like looking forward to it, or they have looked forward to it. You created a tradition and a ritual. Yeah. But I think it also shows me too, like, that there's some inherent, maybe I'm reaching a little bit or reading too much into it, but there's like also an inherent, like, I want that from their side and they're looking forward to it. And that is the milestone that helps transition to,
it was their enthusiasm.
Adulthood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, there's that, there's a book out there called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. I can see it up here. It's by Moore and Gillette, but it's called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And there's a story at the beginning of it that talks about this initiation rites of some old tribal Indian tribes. And there's a story in the beginning of the book, and I think they're talking about a movie that was made, but this boy, I think he's a Caucasian boy, gets left with this tribal group, and he's there for years and years, and he grows up in this tribal group, and he starts to like the chief's daughter as he gets older. And the chief sees what's going on, and he says, no, the boy must die. That boy must die. And so all the tribesmen take this boy, and they take him out into the woods, and you're watching this, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to kill this kid. And they're kind of freaking him out, and they throw him in this cave, and they leave him there overnight. And there's all these ants in the cave, and the ants are starting to bite him, and they basically leave him there for dead. Like, this boy has to die. Well, the chief knows the kid's not going to die. So the next morning, the kid wakes up, he comes out, he's all bruised, he's bitten by these ants, he's terrified. He comes out and he looks around, and the chief says, the boy is dead. Now here's the man. You can date my daughter, you know? And this initiation rites, I was like, what things can we do to guide our kids into adulthood versus let's just be kids till we're 18 and then good luck, you know?
Right.
You're off on your own. And those initiation stories really prompted like, okay, how can I initiate my kids through this?
Yeah. Or worse yet, they never get them. And then they're
At all.
in their mid to late 30s or later and still wondering if they are.
Right. Do I have what it takes to do this?
As an adult, right? Yeah.
Yep.
That's I mean, that's a phenomenal story. The boy must die.
Yeah. The boy must die.
It kind of reminds me of like the latest Dune movie.
I haven't seen it. Well, I saw the latest one, but there's a second one coming out. I don't think the second one's out yet.
Yeah. So, well, not the newest one, that's coming out because it's not out yet. But the old one, it was like I'm showing off my nerdiness right now, but like the whole the Kwisatz Haderach character, like the main guy, needed to die so that the other one could be reborn. Similar concept, but no, I love that the boy must die.
That's right.
That was called King Warrior Magician Lover.
King Warrior Magician Lover, and it's about those 4 stages that a man goes through. And you start off as the lover, you move to the warrior, you then become a king, and then a magician, which is the sage as you get older.
Okay, I'm gonna add that one to the list.
Yeah, it's good.
I love it. This is why I love these conversations. There's always just things that come to mind. It's like, boom. All right. So tell me about your framework, because we touched on holy work. We talked about what you're building. I'd love to hear, like, it's one thing to love something and another thing to put all the effort, time, and resources into building something. So like, what led you to do that? And then what is it that you are doing?
Work. I mean, it kind of goes to even what I was talking about, that taking the kids up to the top of this hill. Have you ever felt a pull in your spirit, a restlessness or a stirring to do something? You probably felt it to start this podcast. There's something happening, and I need to make it. Well, I call that thing the pull. And we all had this pull to create something. And I've had it for my whole life. And when I was in college, it caused me to just be an angsty, angry, discontent person. And I was not a happy person, but God eventually got a hold of me, and I still have these pulls, and what was angsty has turned into, oh no, that restlessness I feel is God. And so as I was at Ramsey and working in my role there with a lot of different creatives, I would write and talk a lot about this pull, because I led creatives and I want them to follow the things that they want to create. And that was for a brand, and that was for a business. But you can also take that, you can work it for a business, but then also take it to your personal life. So we have these pulls. And so I had a lot of writing about the pull. And then I had a lot of writing about journaling, and I had a lot of writing about the war that we face. Like, when you start to follow this pull, when you start to wake up and follow where God's leading you, there will be war against it. Like, you'll feel stupid, or you'll have a bunch of voices in your head. I had a bunch of writing about wilderness and decisions you need to make and all this kind of stuff. And I started to have this idea that, oh man, I want to write a book. I don't know what it'll be about, creativity and leadership and God and mixing all this stuff together. And I probably had that thought starting in 2015. So almost 10 years ago, but I didn't know what it was going to be or where it was going to go. And 2016, I was like, well, this year I'm going to write that book. And, I didn't. I'd get a couple blog posts out and nothing would happen. And
you tapered off?
I tapered off. Exactly. And the next year I thought I was going to do it too, and I didn't do it. And we get to 2019, and I was like, God, I'm not going to make that a goal again, because I'm just going to disappoint myself, because I'm here at Ramsey. I love being at Ramsey. I'm all in here. And so I'm just going to set that aside. Is that just like a selfish desire of mine, or is that actually from you? And, this is all the things I'm wrestling. But so once I kind of let go of that thing, I was like, I'm not going to worry about it here in 2020. I had this little nudge to just gather up all the writing I had done and just see what was there. And so I gathered it all up. I put it in a Word document, and it came to like 60,000 words, which is a lot of words. It's about the length of a book. Now, it wasn't a book. It was just a bunch of random stuff. But what I started to do then was categorize all the content in there. And so I got these note cards out, and I started to put them in little categories. And I was sitting at a coffee shop here in Spring Hill, and I looked down at all these piles of note cards, had kind of formed 7 different piles. And I looked at those and I'm like, holy cow, there is a path here. It's not just a bunch of categories of stuff. There's a path that we follow when we are actually following where God is pulling. So say you had the pull to start this podcast, or someone listening had a pull to start homeschooling or start a family or whatever it might be. You have this pull, but immediately you're like, okay, is that from God? Is that my own? How do I know what this is? And is that actually from God? Well, that's where this second pile of cards came in. And it was what I call the proof that God put that there. And so I had a bunch of writing about the 5th word of the Bible being the word created. In the beginning, God created. And then it says we as man are made in his image. Well, the only thing we know about his image at that point in this story is that he was a creator. That's it. So we're made in his image, but the only thing we know is that he is a creator. He makes things. And then third, in Exodus 31, Moses is at the top of a mountain and he's getting all these instructions for the tent of meeting and the tabernacle. And in the Bible, Exodus 31 is kind of a boring period of the Bible because it's all these details about stuff that's going to be made. But I read this passage 5, 6, 7 years ago that said the first person the Bible mentions as being filled with the Spirit was a guy named Bezalel. And you're like, what? Well, he was the guy that God filled with the Spirit to make all of this stuff that Moses was being instructed to build. God filled this man, Bezalel, with the Spirit to make all this stuff. And so you read that the 5th word of the Bible is created. You read that we're made in the image of God. And then you read a not insignificant point that the first person mentioned as being filled with the Spirit is someone God wants to make something with. This Bezalel guy. He wants to make the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle, the tent of meeting with a human. And I think that's so significant that the thing he wanted to make with a human was going to hold God's presence. It was the tent of meeting, the tabernacles, the Ark of the Covenant. God could have made all that on his own, but he wants to create things with you. He wants to be with you as you create. And so a bunch of writing about the proof that God put these ideas in you. Then a bunch of writing about the practices that you have to go through and the practices of journaling and seeking God each day and giving yourself over to him so that you can actually hear him. Then there's the war we talked about, where once you start doing this, you get resistance, you get fear, you get voices in your head. Then there's the wilderness where you just got to show up and do the work. Then there's the threshold you have to cross. And then ultimately you reach the permission to go after your purpose. And so there's the pull, there's the proof, there's the practices, there's the war, there's the wilderness, there's the threshold, and there's the purpose. And so this path, I'm like, when anybody is starting something new, they go through this. You question whether it's God, but then you're like, are you not seeking him? Then you hit the war and you doubt it. And you wrestle it and you doubt yourself sometimes out of it, but then you just got to show up and do the work. And then sometimes you have to make hard decisions and cross that threshold. And then ultimately you find what the whole point is. You find the purpose. And so that process is a transformative process that I think God is taking us all through. And that process is finding your holy work. It's not just work. It's something deeper. It's something sacred. And so that's what I'm building. I do some coaching on that, and I do some creative leader coaching, but it's all helping people find and follow where God's calling them.
I love it. This is why I don't know if I like video stuff, because when I'm like, I'm receiving what you're saying and like thinking about it, and then I'll look up and I see just like the thinking face. Yeah. That's reserved for everyone else. No, I love
it's all good, man. It's all good.
And just my mind is like processing some things that you said. I mean, you talk about the pull. Hopefully we all have a pull to something.
Yeah. And I think if we hang out in that section a little bit, like what that feels like is not often like, oh, I want to go make a movie or whatever it is. Sometimes it's just restlessness. Sometimes it's just a feeling of being unsettled, where you can't really put your finger on what the problem is. But that's where that restlessness that some of these dads listening to this podcast, if you feel restless or stirring, you just don't know what to do with it, that's God. He's trying to wake you up. He's trying to poke at you so that you will actively start to seek him to figure out where he's guiding.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you stuck on that a little bit, because sometimes we can get restless when we're looking at Amazon and we just want to make an Amazon purchase.
Right.
So I think that's where we can get the pull and we get the desire.
Yeah.
But then you have the proof, right? To kind of look at
exactly
discerning a little bit what that is.
Discerning. Because that pull can lead you to alcoholism. It can lead you to escape, because you're like, I'm restless, so something must be wrong. I need to go have an affair or something horrible,
Right. It's kind of like recognizing that you have that pull. And is it fair to say, as you're building this or have built it, and as you're working with people on it, that if there's that thing, it's maybe not necessarily just that momentary, but if there's that thing that keeps coming back to you and you're just like restlessness, but you're restless with something specific.
Yeah. You need to,
there's something to listen to there.
You need to listen to that. Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. And it doesn't mean up and quit your job, but it's a guidepost in the right direction,
Right. It might help guide you in that. Well, then you set up. Then the proof, and then the practice. So like you discern that, hey, we're like, there's some things that are lining up here. I'm going to put this into practice. I'm going to go and do the different, build the pieces, build the components.
Well,
look what you said. It's like,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
The practices are really, are you actively seeking God every day? For me, I was very restless the first 10 years of Mandy and I's marriage. And that's where the angst came. And I had some addictions that I wasn't able to get over. And I was just that angsty, restless person. And I was at a point where I was like, something has to change. And God, what are we going to do? And I was a believer, but I wasn't actively seeking him every day. And so I started to really doubt whether any of it was real. And so I said, okay, but here's what I'll do. I'm going to get up early. I'm going to read one chapter of this Bible, and I'm going to start writing what I actually think about it and being honest with it. And I started getting up early, and I just started writing out my actual feelings and thoughts. And that's where my practice of journaling started. And for me, it was a therapeutic thing. It wasn't like, oh, and now I'm going to seek God every day, but that's what it turned into. It was me just writing out my angsty thoughts and feelings, but then it turned into, I started to have favor at work, and I started to have these ideas about my kids and blah, blah, blah. Oh my gosh, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. And that's what the journaling has helped me with. It's transformed my life. And I've taught a lot of people how to do it since then, and it's transformed their life too. But that's really what I mean by the practices is, are you actively seeking him every day so that you can discern what's your own desires, what's him actually guiding? And it's not easy. I mean, it's a practice, but that's why I call it that. And so,
right. No, thanks for defining that a little bit further, because in my mind, I jumped ahead, and I'm looking at your site too. So as defined on your site, the practices are build the habits and practices into your life to help you recognize God's voice so you stay on the path.
Yeah, exactly.
You talk about the pull. Some of those with an entrepreneurial spirit sometimes have pulls in lots of directions, which is why sometimes they don't actually get stuff done, because shiny object syndrome, right?
Yeah, so, I have that as well.
I think there's a lot of us that do, but that's for, having a system that helps us be disciplined.
Yeah.
And then the war, the resistance you're going to get.
Yeah.
And then get past that battle, and you're now in the wilderness.
And the war doesn't actually end. It's not like, I got through the war and I got through the wilderness. The war is just something that's constant. When you wake up, so does the enemy. You will start to say you are drawn to do some more things with your kids in a more intentional way. Well, immediately, who knows what's going to happen? Your kid will get sick, or they'll give you an attitude, or whatever it is. something's going to happen to help stop you from wanting to do this. It'll be some kind of resistance. It'll be some kind of fear. It'll be some kind of voice in your head that says, who do you think you are? You don't have what it takes to do this. And those are the things you have to recognize and keep moving on anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I would almost, my brain jumps to, those are the things you should expect, recognize when they happen, and then keep going.
Yes, exactly.
If you're doing it well. No, that's killer.
Partly it's what Mandy and I have talked about is I stepped out, left Ramsey, and 4 months later, she gets this diagnosis of breast cancer. And I don't need to go into details here, but that it was immediate war for us. Like, was this decision right? What's going on? All of a sudden you start doubting everything. And I'm not saying her cancer was war against my career or something, but immediately you start to doubt all the decisions, and fear and voices and resistance come in, and you can choose to crumble under those, or you can be like, nope, we expected this. All right, but we're going to keep going,
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us. I know you and I talked about it briefly prior to jumping on, which, that's one of those things and topics and areas that just, it goes into everything.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
it
your whole
impacts
life.
everything.
Yeah. As I talk, just real quick, as I talk about all this holy work stuff, sometimes as men, it's like, well, I want to accomplish something. I want to build something with my life. I want to be amazing, or blah, 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 blah. And a lot of times God's just going, hey, your most holy work is to be at home with your wife during this period, or take your kids out sledding. It's that kind of stuff that we always have to remember as we're trying to prove ourselves or whatever we're doing.
The term that I use quite a bit on this, and this is actually from somebody when this first started, he said it and it's just stuck with me, is be where your feet are.
Yeah.
And some of that too, I'm going to mend that. Like in this moment, this is like a milestone. We're going to mend it. Evaluate where your feet are, and then be where your feet are. So you also need to understand during this time, it's like, hey, what is the most important thing? My feet, do they really need to be here right now?
Yeah.
And that's based on what your priorities are and what you've set. And if you don't have those, then everything's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned it a couple times, and I'm familiar with it. I'm not as great in the practice of it, but it's journaling. I want to sit on that one for a minute.
For sure.
Can you explain to those that may not be familiar with it as to what it is, maybe what it isn't?
Yeah.
And I'm going in with a little bit of when I've had the conversation around it, there are some preconceived notions. So I'll just set the table with some of the preconceived notions of like you mean like a diary?
Like dear diary.
Journaling?
Diary.
Right. It's like, there's a connotation that kind of comes with it sometimes. And by the way, the only reason that Indiana Jones was able to find the Holy Grail was because his dad kept a diary.
Yeah. There you go.
I wouldn't call his dad not manly. He was Sean Connery, he's a baller. But anyway, if you kind of dive into that for us.
There is a stigma around journaling. And I mean, there's a stigma about men having feelings and acknowledging their feelings. And for me, like I said a few minutes ago, I was desperate. I had to do something with this discontentment that I was feeling. And so what I mean when I say journaling is actually getting a journal and a pen and writing out the truth of what you're thinking and feeling. And the spiritual disciplines that people in saints and theologians have talked for years is silence and solitude. And those are the ones that Jesus did. He would run off after big crowds and he would go get away by himself. That is what the practice of journaling actually does, is you go, you close the room in your office or wherever it is in your home, you get out a journal, you say, good morning, Father, or dear God, or whatever, and you write for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, nonstop about what's going on in your head. And there's that's how it was for me. I just started writing, and some of it was fits and starts and in bullet points and lists and blah, blah, blah. But eventually it does turn into a conversation. And what I prescribe to people, and what I've learned is to do is I come in and I sit for 1 minute in silence.
Mm-hmm.
And I just turn off the phone. In fact, leave it in another room if possible. Shut the door and just sit in silence, and don't put any more inputs into your brain. We have so much stuff coming at us all the time that half the battle is just getting quiet. And then after that minute of silence, just get your journal, get a piece of paper, and just start writing what is going on in your head. It could be, I'm worried about the tires on my car. I'm worried about groceries, and I'm worried about paying the bills this month. I'm worried about the neighbor outside putting his garbage can out while I'm writing this, and I can hear it and it's bothering me. What you're doing is you're working through what's called an epidermis level response. These are the surface layer worries of this world. And if you don't lift your pen, you don't judge what you're writing, you don't worry about spelling or grammar, and you do that for about 5 minutes, and you just keep going, just going through what's going on in your head, about the 5 or 6 minute mark, you will have worked through all that epidermis level stuff. And stuff will start to come out that you had no idea was there. And I've been doing this for such a long time, but I've been starting to research, and there are scientific studies behind this stuff. There's a book out there called The Body Keeps the Score, where the author is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he says there's a 50% drop in doctor visits. There's improved mental health by just journaling your actual thoughts and feelings. Stuff starts to come out because your brain is like one of those ping pong ball things that show the bingo balls. It's a thing you spin. That's your brain, and there's just thoughts going all the time. But journaling out what's going on is like a budget for your mind, because we cannot hold all this stuff, especially in our 2024 time that we're in, or in our culture. There's so much stuff, and so building that habit into your life will change your life. It's part of what caused me to have those ideas about taking my daughter up to the top of the hill and giving her the Bible, because I had given myself space to think. And we're dads and we're thought leaders and all this stuff, but how can you be a thought leader if you never give yourself any time to think? You have to get quiet enough to actually think.
I love that.
So it sounds like a Lisa Frank diary in elementary school or something, but really it's our minds are so incredible and they hold so much, and men try to figure it out, like you were saying earlier, on their own. And they don't know what to do with all the stuff knocking around in our heads. I didn't know what to do. And so I had to start getting it out, and it's transformed my life, and it's transformed a lot of other men's life too, as I've walked them through it.
No, it's what you just said, as far as they don't maybe know what to do, or you're battling against the idea of what other people think. Number one, nobody's going to know if you journal, guys. No one knows. Unless you tell everybody about it. And then chances are they're going to be like, oh, someone else is doing it. And that's called social proofing. And now they're going to do it. And so now we're actually doing beneficial things. I'll be vulnerable with you for a minute. For the first 5 minutes or so that I always have, I think, like, subconsciously I must think of like Shakespeare or something. I always find myself like trying to rhyme and like write these poems. I'm like, this is ridiculous. What is this? I don't even know why I'm doing this. But the psychosomatic piece that you said the book was called The Body Keeps the Score. That's all the stuff that's under that you don't always even know is up here, right? That's still impacting the machine. It's like,
there's Chip Dodd, there's he talks about the voice of the heart, and what you got to do is you got to work through this stuff that just clogs our brains up. It's college applications, it's all this stuff, and we just hold on to it. But if we start writing out and just keep going, your brain, it's like it gives your brain a chance to start putting things in file folders and making sense of this story. Yep. And eventually you do work through it. And about minute 4 or 5, your brain starts to change a little bit and some deeper things start to come out. There's four layers of it. There's the epidermis level, which is what we're talking about. But then you go deeper into muscle layer, which is deeper. And that's where it's really the deeper cares of this world, where you're through worrying about the weather and you get deeper to be like, no, like, what am I doing with my life? And then it goes deeper to the heart, and where you can actually start to figure out how to express what's going on in your heart. And then down to the bone, where sometimes you have to reset bones that are need to be broken and reset so you can grow.
Yeah, there's the body right there.
Yeah, exactly. And
get down to the body. I appreciate you breaking that down. And
you got it.
So being that this is some of your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And I think you got a new program that's gonna be coming out that's focused around this. Isn't that right?
Yep. Okay. February 20th, I'm doing a Holy Work journaling course. I've done it many times. We did one back in November, but this is our winter one. So the February Holy Work journaling course, and it's 6 weeks, and we will meet once a week through Zoom, starting February 20th, and we'll go through March 26th. And what we'll do is you will practice and learn how to go through that epidermis level each week. And then each week we'll add something to it. So you'll learn that practice. This isn't Luke just talking and teaching things. It's you're going through experientially, because what happens is people are like, all right, I listen to Huberman or David Goggins or whatever. And they say things like I'm saying now, but then we don't go do anything with it. We hear it. But what happens is when you set aside an hour and someone's with you and I'm guiding you through it, that causes you to actually do it. And you can actually start to see the benefits and actually get a closer connection with God and see a clear vision for your future. So what we're going to do is we'll go through that epidermis level. We'll go through that muscle layer, the heart layer. Then we'll talk some about the pull. Where is God guiding you? What's the war that's fighting against it? And what's the wilderness you need to work through? And so that's what we'll work through on this journaling course starting February 20th. You can get some more info at holywork.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Knowledge is just good trivia unless you actually put an application, and that's where you can become skilled.
Exactly.
So
good trivia. Love it. That's a great way to put it.
Okay. Where can everyone find you? They want to follow you, see what you got going on. Where's the best place to track you down?
Again, my name is hard to spell, but Instagram and LinkedIn. But my name, if you go to Luke LeFevre on Instagram, and LeFevre is LeFevre. That's where I put out a lot of stuff, encouraging stuff about some of this Holy Work thing. And that's where I would go. But if you can't remember how to spell my name, just go to holywork.com and you can find my Instagram stuff there.
Love it. Or read the title of this episode again.
Yeah.
And you're good to go.
Yeah.
We try to help everybody out here. Well, no, I appreciate it. The time just flies on these things.
Got it.
And I know we got to wrap, but we'll be thinking about you and
thank you.
What you guys are facing. And just like we say to everyone on this podcast too, make sure you're not doing it DIY, but loved having you, man. And it goes fast because it's fun. And that's because it's a fulfilling conversation. So thank you again for being on here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So good to see you again, Zach.
You too, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, me too.
Hey, everybody. If you've listened this long, I know you've got some things that you took away from this conversation with Luke and I, and go check him out. LukeLeFevre.com. You can look at it again in the show notes. But most importantly, if you took something away, I bet somebody you know also could take something away. So share it with them, because the whole point of this podcast is to help build things together and support each other in a way that we can go and equip ourselves and our families to be successful in the future. You can follow us on socials at SkilledDad like usual, and we're going to see you on the next episode. But we hope that you took something that you can apply to your life on your journey to becoming the Skilled Dad.